The night sky above Valith Prime had turned into a nightmare. What should have been peaceful darkness filled with distant stars was now a writhing mass of biomechanical horror. The Vorthok swarm moved like a living disease across the heavens, their ships pulsing with sickly green light that made the crystal cities below look like dying embers. Ambassador? Kelrin pressed her six-fingered hand against the viewing portal of the emergency chamber, watching her world burn. Her translucent blue skin, normally a soft azure like calm ocean waters, now flickered with rapid patterns of orange and red, the Zilani equivalent of pure terror. Below in the streets, her people ran screaming as massive tentacles burst from the ground, dragging civilians into organic pods that would convert them into more biomass for the swarm. "How many worlds have we lost this cycle?" asked Counselor Thane of the Rigel territories, his metallic voice barely steady through his species' vocal processors. 817 confirmed dead systems, Kelrin replied, her voice breaking. 3 more. Under active consumption, the Helix Nebula colonies went silent yesterday. The emergency session of the Galactic Collective had been called in the Grand Chamber aboard the Mobile. Command Station Unity's hope, but there was precious little hope in the room. Representatives from across known space sat in their environmental pods and biosuits, all sharing the same look of desperate fear. The elegant Altarians with their feathered crests sat next to the rock-like granite clans. The energy beings of Proxima flickered nervously in their containment fields, while the insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in distress. For 300 cycles, the Galactic Collective had maintained peace through diplomacy and careful resource management. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy. Their tactics focused on minimal casualties and preserving infrastructure. It had worked beautifully against every threat they had faced, until the Vorthok swarm arrived from the void between galaxies. "Show them the Kepler footage," Kelrin said quietly. The chamber's central hologram activated, displaying the final transmission from the Kepler system. The beautiful garden world of New Eden appeared on screen, its floating cities connected by bridges of living crystal. Then the swarm arrived. The bioships descended like hungry animals, their hulls opening to reveal forests of grasping tentacles and drilling appendages. Within hours, the planet's surface was covered in a carpet of writhing biomass. The cities were consumed, their materials converted into more swarm vessels. The people became fuel. "We tried everything," Admiral Zex of the Collective. Defense Force reported, his normally proud bearing broken by defeat. "Energy weapons only feed them power. Kinetic rounds are absorbed and recycled. Our electronic warfare systems can't penetrate their biological networks. Every tactic we use, they adapt to within hours. They learn, they evolve, they become stronger." The silence in the chamber was deafening. These were species that had mastered, faster than light travel, created artificial worlds, and solved the mysteries of quantum consciousness. Yet they were helpless against an enemy that simply consumed and grew stronger. "There must be something," whispered the delegate from Vega. "Prime. Some weapon we haven't tried? Some ally we haven't contacted?" Kelrin's skin patterns shifted to deep purple, the color of desperate decision among her people. "There is one possibility. It's unconventional." She activated her personal datapad, displaying a star chart that focused on a small yellow star in what most species considered the galactic backwater. "Sol system, 3rd planet. The species calls itself human." The reaction was immediate. Several delegates recoiled in their seats. The Altarian representative actually ruffled her feathers in distress. Those primitives." Counselor Vex of the Hegemony stood up so fast his crystalline body rang like a bell. "They've barely mastered chemical rockets. Their planet is a toxic wasteland of violence and predation." "Exactly," Kelrin said quietly. "Their world is what we call a Class 12 death world. Gravity twice what most of us can survive. An atmosphere that would corrode our ships, or their systems that could destroy our cities and the life forms." She shuddered. "They have creatures that hunt other creatures for sport. They fight wars over resources and ideology. They've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and their own weapons of mass destruction. That makes them monsters, not allies, protested the delegate from Centauri. Does it? Kelrin pulled up another display. Our xenobiologists have been studying their transmissions. For 50 cycles. Yes, they fight, but they also sacrifice themselves for strangers. They run into burning buildings to save others. They throw themselves between predators and their young. They have a concept they call heroism that involves deliberately choosing death over dishonor. The chamber fell quiet as the implications sank in. The Vorthok swarm has conquered 47 species across 3 galaxies, Kelrin continued. They've never encountered anything they couldn't adapt to or overcome. But they've never faced a species that was forged in constant struggle, that treats warfare as an art form that considers death in battle to be honorable. Admiral Zex leaned forward. Their military capabilities are primitive, chemical explosives and metal projectiles, which the swarm has never encountered, Kelrin pointed out. They adapt to energy weapons because that's what civilized species use. But what happens when someone shoots them with a chunk of metal moving at hypersonic speeds? What happens when someone uses fire and acid and toxins as weapons? The silence stretched on. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke again, his crystalline voice subdued, the political ramifications alone, inviting a species of predators into the collective. Better than extinction, Kelrin said simply. Because that's our choice. Now, we can maintain our principles and die with dignity, or we can ask the monsters from the Deathworld to save us. The vote was taken in absolute silence. 7 species voted against contact. 12 voted in favor. Fear had overcome prejudice, if only barely. As the chamber emptied and representatives returned to their dying worlds, Kelrin remained at the viewing portal. In the distance, Valith Prime continued to burn. Her mate and children were down there somewhere, hiding in the deep caves with the other survivors, waiting for rescue that might never come. The quantum fold communication array powered up with a harmonic whine that hurt her sound-sensitive ears. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a small blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, receivers would pick up the collective's desperate message. Psst, she whispered to the stars, her skin flickering with patterns of hope and terror. Let the monsters be on our side this time. The signal raced through hyperspace toward Earth, carrying with it the fate of countless worlds and the desperate prayer of a dying civilization. Captain Li Haiyan had seen battlefields across 3 continents on Earth, but nothing had prepared him for this sight. The space around Valith Prime looked like God himself had thrown a tantrum. Massive crystalline ships hung broken in the void, their beautiful geometric designs shattered into razor-sharp debris that caught starlight like deadly diamonds. Wrapped around them like parasites were the Vorthok bioships, grotesque masses of living metal and flesh that pulsed with their own sickly light. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Park Jiho from his position at the communications console. The young officer's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his headset. Sir, I'm picking up life signs from some of those crystal ships. Aliens. They're still alive in there. Hion's jaw tightened. Through the main viewport of the UES Vengeance, he could see movement inside the shattered holes. Pale blue figures pressed against cracked viewing ports, their bioluminescent skin flashing in patterns that didn't need translation. They were screaming for help. How long have they been trapped? Hien asked. Based on the debris patterns and energy decay... maybe 3 days, sir. The Vorthok ships are keeping them alive on purpose. The bridge crew exchanged grim looks. Everyone knew what that meant. The swarm wasn't just killing these people quickly. They were being harvested slowly, converted into biomass to fuel more Vorthok growth. It was torture on an industrial scale, sir. Communications Officer Park suddenly straightened. Incoming transmission from the escort vessels. They're asking us to maintain safe distance and follow proper engagement protocols. Captain Hien actually laughed, but there was no humor in it. Safe distance. These elegant alien ships with their energy shields and plasma cannons wanted to fight this war from a comfortable range. It's like some kind of video game. That's probably why they were losing. The escort vessels were beautiful in their own way.
Oh.
Sleek ships that looked more like works of art than weapons of war. Their hulls were smooth curves of some kind of crystalline metal that seemed to glow from within. No rough edges, no visible weapons ports, no scars from battle. They moved through space like dancers, graceful and precise. The human fleet was the exact opposite. The UES Vengeance and her sister ships looked like they had been built in a junkyard by someone who really wanted to kill things. Thick armor plating covered every surface, bristling with gun turrets, missile pods, and what the aliens would soon learn were boarding torpedoes. The humans hadn't tried to make their ships beautiful. They had tried to make them survive. "The escort commander, we appreciate their concern," Hyen said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from leading men through hell and bringing them home. "But we're taking point on this one. Signal the fleet. Battle formation Delta. We're going in hard and fast." Behind him, Colonel Kim Min-ho looked up from where he was field stripping his sidearm for the third time. The old soldier had habits that kept him alive, and checking his weapons was one of them. His face was a roadmap of scars from Earth's endless conflicts, a burn mark from the Jakarta Chemical War, a line across his jaw from shrapnel in the Arctic conflict, and eyes that had seen too much death to be afraid of a little more. "You sure about this, Captain?" Minho asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "These bioships are the size of city blocks. The boys are good, but they're not miracle workers." "Your boys are the meanest sons of bitches on 3 continents, Hyen replied. "If anyone can board one of those nightmare factories and come back alive, it's them." The colonel smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "Copy that, sir. We'll get it done." The intercom crackled with Dr. Yuneri's voice from the medical bay. Unlike the career soldiers on the bridge, she sounded genuinely excited. "Tap! I've finished my analysis of the Vorthok biosamples the aliens provided. This is fascinating stuff. Their cellular structure is completely unlike anything in our databases, part organic, part mechanical, with neural networks that seem to span entire ships. But here's the important part. They still follow basic organic principles. They can be hurt. What's the best way to hurt them, Doc? Old-fashioned ways, actually. Their biomechanical nature makes them incredibly adaptable to energy weapons. They literally evolve defenses in real time. But physical trauma, toxins, cellular disruption, they're not ready for that. These things have been fighting civilized species for so long, they've forgotten what real predators look like. Through the viewport, the alien escort ships were pulling back, their elegant forms retreating to what they considered a safe engagement distance. Their energy weapons began charging with soft blue glows, preparing to fire their precise, measured volleys that had failed so spectacularly against the swarm. "Sir," reported Tactical Officer on Jisoo, "alien ships are requesting our battle plan and coordination protocols." Hyen almost felt sorry for them. These species had spent centuries fighting wars like chess matches, carefully planned moves, minimal casualties, preservation of infrastructure. They probably had committees that decided when it was appropriate to shoot back. "Tell them our battle plan is simple," Hyen said. "We're going to ram those bioships, board them, and kill everything inside that isn't human. Then we're going to blow them up from the inside." The silence on the alien communication channel was deafening. "Sir, they're asking if we need backup," Park reported, trying to keep a straight face. "Tell them to stay clear of the debris field. This is going to get messy." The human fleet began to accelerate. Unlike the alien ships that moved with graceful precision, the human vessels charged forward like wild animals. Their engines burned bright white, pushing the ships faster than their alien escorts thought was safe or sane. In the marine prep bays throughout the fleet, soldiers were loading weapons that would have horrified the Galactic Collective. Explosives, metal slugs designed to tear through flesh, and boarding equipment that looked more like medieval siege gear than advanced military technology. These weren't tools for a civilized war. They were tools for butchery, and for the first time in this conflict, that was exactly what was needed. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Tactical Captain. Hyen looked out at the Vorthok bioships waiting ahead. Massive, pulsing creatures that had devoured entire civilizations. Behind him, his crew prepared for the kind of close-quarters battle that hadn't been seen in this galaxy for centuries. The aliens wanted to know if humans could fight monsters. They were about to find out, Commander. Song Daeho, had been in some bad places during his 15 years of military service. He'd crawled through burning buildings in Seoul during the urban war, survived 3 days in a collapsed bunker during the Siberian campaign, and once spent a week eating rats in the tunnels beneath Jakarta. But staring at the Vorthok bioship, devourer through the reinforced viewport of boarding pod Alpha 7, he knew this was going to be the worst day of his life. The thing was huge. Not just big like a battleship, but huge like a living mountain floating in space. Its surface wasn't metal or any kind of normal ship material. Instead, it looked like someone had skinned a whale the size of a city and then covered it with tumors. Massive veins pulsed beneath the surface, carrying God knew what kind of fluids through the creature's body. Weapon clusters sprouted from the hull like infected boils, each one twitching and moving independently as they tracked potential targets. "Holy shit," whispered Corporal Lee Kangman, pressed against the viewport next to him. "It's breathing." He was right. The entire ship expanded and contracted in a slow, steady rhythm. With each breath, toxic gases vented from ports along its sides, creating a cloud of green death around the vessel. 30 seconds to contact, announced their pilot, Lieutenant Choi Soo-ben, her voice tight with concentration. The boarding pod shuddered as it accelerated toward the bioship's hull. Behind them, 19 other pods were making the same insane journey, each carrying a full squad of Earth's most experienced soldiers. Daeho looked back at his team. 20 Marines, all volunteers, all veterans of humanity's bloodiest conflicts. They wore the new combat suits that had been hastily designed based on alien intelligence reports, thick armor plating, redundant life support systems, and chemical filters that could hopefully keep them alive in whatever toxic environment waited inside the bioship. "Listen up," Daeho said into his com, making sure his voice reached every member of the team. "Intel says these things adapt to energy weapons in real time. They learn from every shot fired at them. So we stick to the old ways. Bullets, blades, and bombs. If it moves and it's not wearing one of our suits, you kill it." Questions? Private Nam Ki-woo raised his hand. The young soldier looked nervous, which was understandable considering they were about to board an alien nightmare ship. "Sir, what if we run into civilians? Prisoners?" It was a good question. Intelligence suggested the Vorthok kept some victims alive for extended harvesting periods. "Use your judgment, soldier. If they're human or look like they need help, we extract them. If they're part of the ship's biology, we terminate with extreme prejudice." The magnetic clamps engaged with a sound like thunder, and immediately the hull began to fight back. Through the viewport, they could see the ship's surface rippling and changing, trying to reject the foreign object that had attached itself to its skin. "Hull breach in progress," reported Sergeant Choi Yoonbi, activating the plasma cutter. The tool sliced through the bioship's outer membrane like a hot knife through butter, but the smell that immediately filled the pod made everyone gag. It was the stench of a slaughterhouse, combined with an electrical fire, with undertones of something that reminded Daeho of his grandmother's kimchi, gone horribly wrong. "Gas masks on," he ordered, pulling his own breathing apparatus over his face. "And remember, we're not in Kansas anymore." Beyond the glowing hole in the bioship's hull lay a corridor that looked like the inside of someone's digestive system. The walls were pink and wet, covered in veins that pulsed with bioluminescent fluid. The floor beneath their feet felt spongy and warm, like walking on living tissue. "Jesus Christ," muttered Nam Ki-woo, his rifle trembling slightly in his hands. "This thing is alive." "Stay focused," Daeho ordered, taking point as they moved deeper into the ship. The corridor branched ahead of them, leading to chambers that glowed with different colors of organic light. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear sounds that made their skin crawl, a rhythmic thumping like a massive heart, wet sliding. Noises, and what might have been screaming. The walls around them were covered in what looked like neural networks, thick bundles of fiber optic cables, made of living tissue. Data flowed through them in pulses of light, and Deho realized they were walking through the ship's nervous system. Every step they took was being reported to whatever served as the creature's brain. "Movement ahead," reported Corporal Park Sunho, raising his assault rifle. "Something big." The first Vorthok warrior came around the corner like a nightmare given form. 3 meters tall and covered in black chitinous armor that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. Its arms ended in blade-like appendages that dripped with some kind of acid, and its head was a cluster of red eyes above a mouth full of rotating teeth. The thing moved with mechanical precision, its multiple eyes tracking each human soldier. With calculating intelligence, it raised its blade arms, and Deho could see bioelectric energy building up along their edges. The same energy bursts that had cut through galactic collective shields like paper. Deho didn't give it the chance to fire. His rail pistol barked 3 times, sending tungsten slugs through the creature's center mass at hypersonic velocity. Green fluid exploded from the wounds, and the Vorthok warrior staggered backward, its perfect mechanical movements suddenly clumsy and erratic. But it wasn't dead. Even as they watched, the wounds began to close, and the creature's armor started to shift and thicken. It was adapting in real time, just like the intelligence reports had warned. Fortunately, Sergeant Choi Yoonbi had been moving during the firefight. While the creature focused on Deho and his smoking pistol, she slipped around behind it with her monomolecular blade. The weapon was a piece of Earth technology that the aliens had never seen. A sword with an edge, only 1 molecule thick, sharp enough to cut through almost anything on the atomic level. The blade sliced through the neural cluster at the base of the creature's skull like it was made of water. The Vorthok warrior froze mid-adaptation, its systems crashing as its brain was severed from its body. It toppled backward with a wet thud, green fluid pooling around its corpse. "Contact," Deho reported to the fleet over his comm system. "First Vorthok warrior down. Kinetic weapons effective. Repeat, kinetic weapons effective." From the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Captain Lee Hyan's voice crackled through the static. "Copy that, Alpha 7. How bad is it in there?" Deho looked around at the pulsing walls, the pools of toxic fluid, and the sounds of more creatures moving in the distance. Through the neural networks in the walls, he could see lights flashing in patterns that suggested the entire ship was now aware of their presence and mobilizing to deal with the intrusion. "Sir," he replied, "it's exactly as bad as we thought it would be, but they're not gods. They die just like everything else when you hit them hard enough." Behind him, his team was already moving deeper into the ship, their weapons ready, and their faces grim with determination. They were humans from Earth, and they had brought death to the stars. Major Lim Soo-jin had seen hell before, but this was something entirely new. What used to be the grand cultural center of Valith Prime, a beautiful crystal palace where the Zilani had displayed their greatest artworks, was now a pulsing nightmare factory. The elegant spires had been consumed by biomechanical growths that looked like infected organs, and the air itself was thick with floating spores that glowed with an evil green light. Masks tight, people Soo-jin ordered through her cum as she led her battalion through the twisted corridors. The breathing apparatus they wore was jury-rigged from mining equipment and medical filters, hastily modified to keep the toxic atmosphere from melting their lungs. Most of the galactic collective species would have been dead within minutes of breathing this air. But humans had grown up on a planet where the atmosphere tried to kill you in a dozen different ways. Behind her, Sergeant Kim Woo-jin carried what used to be a standard plasma rifle, now modified with crystalline components that Dr. Yoon Nari had reverse-engineered from captured Vorthok technology. The weapon hummed with an ugly sound as it charged, and when it fired, it didn't just shoot energy beams, it shot pure destruction infused with the bioship's own genetic codes turned against it. "This place used to be beautiful," whispered Private, Junghoun, stepping carefully around a pool of acid that was slowly eating through the crystal floor. Through her helmet's camera feed, she could see the twisted remains of what had once been a sculpture garden. The Zilani artworks were still there, but they were now covered in pulsing veins and neural networks, turned into part of the bioship's sensory system. "Movement ahead," called out Corporal Zhang Minwu, raising his enhanced rifle. The weapon's targeting system was picking up heat signatures in the organic maze ahead of them. Multiple contacts, big ones. The Vorthok had learned to fear human boarding parties. After 3 days of humans ripping through their bioships like chainsaws through wet paper, the alien intelligence had started adapting its tactics. Instead of sending warrior drones to fight humans in open combat, it had begun creating traps designed specifically to kill the aggressive mammals from Earth. The corridor ahead suddenly erupted in a spray of acid as hidden pods burst open along the walls. Any normal species would have retreated, called for backup, waited for the chemical engineers to neutralize the threat, but Sujin's team wasn't normal. They were products of Earth's polluted cities and toxic battlefields, raised in environments where the air itself was poison and the rain could strip paint from metal. "Hold your breath and push through," Sujin ordered, charging forward into the cloud of acid vapor. Her suit's armor began to smoke and bubble as the chemicals ate at it, but she kept moving. Behind her, her soldiers followed without hesitation, their faces grim behind their face masks. Private Osehan was the first to notice something strange. As they fought their way through the acid cloud, the bioship's walls around them began to change color, shifting from the normal pink and red to a sickly yellow. "Major," he called out, "something's wrong with the ship. Look at the walls." Sujin looked around and saw what he meant. The neural networks that covered every surface were flickering erratically, and the bioluminescent veins were pulsing in chaotic patterns instead of their usual steady rhythm. It looked like the bioship was having some kind of allergic reaction. "Doc Yoon," she called over the come to the medical team back on the Vengeance. "We're seeing some kind of biological distress in the ship's systems. The walls are changing color, and the neural networks are going haywire." Dr. Yunari's excited voice crackled through the static. "That's impossible, unless—" "Wait, run a bioscan on your immediate area. Check for foreign organic material." Sihan activated his suit's bioscanner and immediately got a reading that made his eyes widen. "Major, I'm reading massive spore contamination throughout this section, but it's not Vorthok spores. It's Earth fungi. We've introduced Earth-based biological agents into the ship's ecosystem." Implications hit Sujin like a lightning bolt. Humans carried Earth's biology with them wherever they went. Bacteria, viruses, fungi, and microscopic life forms that had evolved in one of the most hostile environments in the galaxy. What was harmless to humans could be deadly poison to alien life forms that had never encountered Earth's aggressive microorganisms. "All teams, this is Major Sujin." She broadcast to every human unit fighting inside the bioships. "Breach your environmental seals on my mark. We're going to introduce these bastards to Earth biology." The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Human soldiers throughout the Vorthok fleet began opening their suit seals, releasing clouds of Earth-based microorganisms into the bioship's internal atmospheres. The effect was immediate and devastating. The ship's immune systems evolved to handle the sterile environments of space and the controlled biology of conquered worlds, had no defenses against the chaotic diversity of Earth life. Within hours, the bioships began to convulse. Their hulls rippled and bulged as internal systems fought a losing battle against microscopic invaders. Weapon pods withered and died as Earth fungi colonized their neural networks. The elegant biological machinery that had conquered dozens of worlds was being eaten alive by something as simple as bread mold. Captain Lee, Hyen watched from the bridge of the Vengeance as the Vorthok fleet writhed in space like dying animals. The massive bioships that had seemed so invincible were now rupturing from within, their hulls splitting open to release clouds of spores and toxic gases into the vacuum of space. So reported Communications Officer Park Ji-ho were getting reports from all teams. The Vorthok are retreating from the infected ships. They're abandoning their positions and trying to establish quarantine protocols. Hyen almost smiled. The Vorthok swarm, with all their advanced biotechnology and adaptive evolution, were running away from Earth germs. It would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying, sometimes he said to Park, watching another bioship tear itself apart. As Earth fungi spread through its nervous system, being from a death world means you carry death with you wherever you go. The war was turning. The Vorthok had evolved to handle energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with the raw biological chaos of a world where life itself was a weapon. Earth's children had brought their planet's gift to the stars, the gift of beautiful, terrible, unstoppable life that consumed everything in its path. For the first time since the swarm had arrived, the aliens were learning what it meant to be afraid. Admiral Bei Jinwu had commanded fleets through Earth's most brutal space battles, but nothing in his 40-year career had prepared him for the sight of the Vorthok queenship, Eternal Hunger. The massive biomechanical horror dominated Valith Prime's orbit like a cancerous moon, surface writhing with weapon clusters and defensive organisms that looked like they had been grown in Satan's own laboratory. The thing was 2 kilometers of pure nightmare. Its hull pulsed with veins the size of subway tunnels, pumping unknown fluids through a circulatory system that spanned the entire vessel. Clusters of eyes, each one the size of a fighter craft, tracked the approaching human fleet with malevolent intelligence. And everywhere, constantly growing weapon pods sprouted and died and regrew in endless cycles of biological warfare adaptation. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures from inside the Queen ship, reported Lieutenant Commander Han Yura from the tactical station. Whatever's powering that thing, it's beyond anything in our databases. The energy output alone could power half of Earth for a century. Bei nodded grimly. Intelligence reports suggested the Queen ship was more than just a vessel. It was the central nervous system for the entire Vorthok swarm. Kill the Queen, and every bioship in the galaxy would lose its coordination and higher intelligence. But getting close enough to kill it would require the kind of sacrifice that made strong men weep.
All boarding pods away,
Hanyura announced. Colonel Kim Min-ho's assault teams are making their approach runs now. Through the bridge's main viewport, Bei could see the tiny specks of the boarding pods racing toward the Queen ship like angry wasps attacking a giant. Each pod carried 20 of Earth's most experienced soldiers, volunteers who knew they probably wouldn't be coming home. The Queen ship's defensive systems immediately began tracking them, launching clouds of biomechanical interceptors that looked like flying sharks made of metal and flesh. Pod 7 is hit, Hanyura reported, her voice tight with professional calm. Pod 12 is venting atmosphere. Pod 3 is... Jesus, sir. Pod 3 just got swallowed whole by one of those defense creatures. Bei watched the tactical display as red lights winked out one by one. Of the 50 pods that had launched, only 37 made it through the defensive screen. That meant nearly 300 human soldiers had died just trying to reach the Queen ship's hull. In the old wars on Earth, commanders would have called off the attack after losses like that. But this wasn't Earth, and the stakes were higher than one planet's survival. Pod Alpha 1 has breached the primary hull, Hanyura announced. Colonel Min-ho's team is inside. Inside the Queen ship, Colonel Kim Min-ho led his surviving soldiers through corridors that screamed. The walls themselves were alive, covered in sensory organs that tracked their every movement while defensive spines leaked paralytic toxins into the air. The floor beneath their feet felt like walking on a giant's tongue, warm and wet and constantly shifting. Stay together, Min-ho ordered through his cum as they moved deeper into the ship's central nervous system. Watch your corners and remember, everything in here wants to kill us. The corridors branched and merged like blood vessels, following no human logic or design. The Queen ship had grown rather than been built, its internal structure based on alien biology rather than engineering principles. Bioluminescent veins in the walls pulsed with data streams carrying information to and from the creature's brain. And the air itself hummed with electronic interference from the ship's neural networks. Dr. Yoon Nari had insisted on joining the final assault team, her medical equipment hastily converted into weapons designed to disrupt the Queen's neural pathways. She carried syringes filled with Earth pathogens, biological weapons that had been refined over 3 days of fighting to specifically target Vorthok cellular structures. The brain should be directly ahead, she called out, consulting her bioscanner. I'm reading massive neural activity concentrated in a chamber about 50 meters forward. As they approached the Queen's central consciousness, the attacks became more desperate. Waves of warrior drones poured from side passages, each one specifically evolved to counter human tactics. Some were covered in armor designed to deflect, kinetic weapons. Others moved with inhuman speed to avoid human reflexes. A few had even developed primitive projectile weapons based on captured human technology. But the humans adapted too. When the armor-plated drones proved resistant to bullets, Sergeant Choi Yun-bi switched to her monomolecular blade and began cutting them apart at the joints. When the fast-moving attackers became too quick to target, Private Park Sun-ho used area effect, explosives that filled entire corridors with deadly shrapnel. The Queen's central chamber was a cathedral of living flesh. The walls rose in organic curves toward a ceiling lost in shadows. And in the center of the space hung the Overmind itself, a brain the size of a city bus, suspended in a web of neural fibers and surrounded by protective membranes that pulsed. With their own heartbeat, as the human team entered the chamber, the Overmind's voice filled their heads. It didn't speak in words, but in concepts and emotions that bypassed human language entirely. The message was clear: ancient superiority, evolutionary perfection. The futility of resistance against a consciousness that had absorbed the knowledge of 47 conquered species. But as the humans began their assault on the brain chamber, something in the Overmind's mental voice changed. For millennia, it had faced enemies that fought with logic and calculation, species that valued preservation of life and infrastructure above victory. The humans were different. They fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that the Overmind couldn't understand or predict, Commander. Song Daeho placed the final explosive charges against the Queen's primary cortex, while his team held off the last wave of defenders. The biomechanical monsters came at them like a tide of living death. But the humans met them with weapons and tactics that had been refined in Earth's most brutal conflicts. The Overmind tried desperately to understand these creatures who fought. Without apparent logic, who sacrificed themselves for strangers, who faced certain death with jokes and battle cries instead of the fear and desperation it had come to expect from its enemies. In its vast alien intelligence, something approaching panic began to form.
Ow.
For Earth and all her children, Daeho whispered, and triggered the detonation. The explosion tore through the Queen's brain like a thunderbolt. Neural pathways that had coordinated fleets across multiple galaxies went silent in an instant. The massive bioship convulsed once, its hull rippling like disturbed water, and then went completely still. Across the Valith system, Vorthok vessels began to drift aimlessly as their central intelligence died. The elegant coordination that had made them unstoppable dissolved into chaos. On Valeth Prime's surface, the biomechanical structures that had been consuming the planet's cities collapsed into inert organic matter. Ambassador Kelrin stood in the ruins of her capital city, watching. Human medics treat wounded Zelani with the same desperate care they showed their own species. These Deathworlders, these monsters from a world of violence and predation, had crossed the galaxy to save people they had never met from an enemy they had never faced. 3 days later, in the emergency session of the Galactic Collective, the vote was unanimous for the first time in the organization's history. Humanity would join the collective not as junior members or probationary allies, but as full partners and designated protectors. They would be the guardians who watched the dark spaces between stars, the ones who stood ready to face whatever nightmares the universe might spawn. Captain Lee Hyen received the news as he stood in the UES Vengeance's observation deck. Looking out at the infinite field of stars that stretched to the galactic rim, somewhere out there in the darkness were other threats, other horrors that peaceful civilizations couldn't imagine or fight, but now they had humanity watching the dark. The children of Earth had brought their gift to the galaxy, the terrible, beautiful knowledge that sometimes the only way to preserve life was to be very, very good at dealing death. The end.